Thank you so much for joining us online today. We are always encouraged to know how God is using this ministry to impact lives all around the world. If your life has been impacted or you have a story to share of what God is doing in your life, please let us know by visiting tworiversassembly.com. Also, if you would like to help support this ministry financially, you can do so today by giving online and helping us bring messages just like this one to you and hundreds of others all around the world each and every week. Finally, we want you to take a moment right now to subscribe to this channel, then share this content with others who might need it. Again, thank you for watching today. We hope you enjoy this message.
All right, so I want to greet everybody that is joining us online. Thank you for tuning in and watching. And we are continuing in our series called Breaking Bad. This week, the title of the message is Altered Legacy. And if you look at the way that's spelled, that is not an error. It's Altared. The idea behind that being that our legacy, what we leave behind, how we are remembered, I believe can be radically impacted by the time that we spend with Jesus. And what an altar is that place that you meet with God. It's that moment that you spend with Jesus, and it could be anywhere. An altar, some of us think about the altar as the front of the church. I think of the altar as any place that I can meet with God. So I want you this Sunday to think about, where is it that you meet with God? Where is it that you can discover Jesus? For me, one of those places was at Toyota in Springfield, Missouri, standing outside waiting for a customer. I was a car salesman, waiting for somebody to come, and I was going to show him a car. And while that was happening, I was meeting with God. He was pouring His Spirit and working in my heart and working in my life and drawing me near to Him. And I will never forget what God did while I was standing there outside meeting with Him. And so I think that time that I spent at the altar outside of the truck department at Reliable Toyota in Springfield, Missouri, altered my life. And it's changing how I will be remembered. And so what I want to talk about today is this idea of an altered legacy. How many are paying attention to the world news and current events and know what's happening with ISIS and all of the problems that are happening in Iraq and in that region of the world? There is a group of people, they're titled ISIS, it's Islamic State, and they're killing Christians. And recently they've been releasing videos of Christians being martyred. They're putting guns to the back of the heads of these men, and they're telling them to deny Jesus. And then the men are saying, no, I won't deny Christ. And then these men are pulling the trigger and killing these Christians. And it's a very startling reality that this is happening, that men and women throughout the world today are facing persecution. They, unlike us, do not have the freedom to gather together and worship God openly. And in their profession of faith, they are being killed as followers of Jesus. And so what it makes me think about is my own life, and I begin to think, God, how would I respond in that moment? How would I respond if somebody stuck a gun to my head and say, deny Jesus? You get to live if you deny Christ. You get to die if you claim Him. And so I start to think about what a powerful moment that is. Those videos, whether it's for gruesomeness or whatever the reason is, they are being passed around and people are watching them. And it is a strong moment. And what's interesting is I had this. Growing up, going to Bible college, I would go to the altars on Friday nights. It was this CMF, Campus Missions Fellowship, and these missionaries would come in, and they would always talk about these Christians who are persecuted, and then you would go to the altar, and we would pray. And at the altar, I would ask God, God, I am ready to be a martyr. I'm ready to die for you. I'm ready to lay my life down. I want to be remembered as somebody who was all in. I don't want to serve you halfway. I don't want to serve you a little bit. I want to serve you with all of my life, with every fiber of my being. And I remember praying that prayer at the altar and having God speak to me that day and say, Will, I don't want you to die for me. I want you to live for me. And I thought, God, that's a lot harder. Because I could go out in a blaze of glory, but living for you means I would have to make decisions to follow you every day of my life. I think that if somebody put a gun to my head, I could ramp myself up to say, you know what, I'm not going to deny Jesus. I'm not going to deny Christ in this moment because eternity is at stake. And if I die, I go to be with Christ in heaven. I am absolutely convinced of the afterlife. I am absolutely convinced of eternity. I'm absolutely convinced that without Christ, there is no hope. That it is only through Jesus that we can be saved. I'm absolutely convinced of that. What I have difficulty with is living for him every day of my life. And so I'm having this encounter with Jesus, and he's speaking to me, and I'm realizing something has to shift in my life. I would be ready to die for Christ, but I think it's harder to live for Christ. And so I started to think about, what would my legacy be if I wasn't judged by this one moment where I could go out in a blaze of glory? What would my legacy be right now? How do people see my life? Would somebody look at me and say, that's a follower of Jesus? Would somebody, if I was to die, not because somebody stuck a gun to my head, but at my funeral, when they're talking about my life and they're talking about who I was and what I stood for, would they say Will Hampton was a follower of Jesus? What I came away from that experience with is this desire that I would be marked by Jesus. That my life's remembrance would be the first thing that anybody would say about me is that he loved Jesus. And because he loved Jesus, he loved others. That's my heart's cry. That's my desperate plea. And I want today for us to think about that. I want for us to be caught between the reality of how we live and the reality of who Jesus is calling us to be. Because when you and I die, we will have people gather around and they're going to say, this is what this person was about. And on that day, they can say, you know, he was really big into dirt bikes. Or he was really big into movies. Or she was really pretty. And everywhere she went, she had all of her fashion together. Or she was somebody who dedicated herself to her job. Really meticulous, never late. I think there's all kinds of good things that people could say about us, but would they say that person loved Jesus? And that's what our legacy is. Well, ladies and gentlemen, today we are shaping our legacy. And in this series is based off this idea that as you and I are walking through life, it's not until we don't have to wait till we die to pass an inheritance along. We don't have to wait till we die to have our legacy remembered. We are shaping our families. And during this series, we discovered last week that there are all kinds of traits that are being inherited from our parents that we live into. All the things that we said we would never do, all the things that we said, oh, that was mom and dad, I'm never going to do that. Somehow, we end up doing it. And it's this whole line, this whole history of our lives being impacted negatively or positively by the people that have come before us. And so today, I want you to think about how your family is remembered. How would you characterize your family? How would you think about the people that have come through your line? And this is a powerful idea because that begins to shape how you think about yourself. Your family, this is I don't have time to get into all the stats of all of this, but your family begins to shape and mold how you think about yourself and what you can achieve and what you will accomplish in your life. And so today, you come from a legacy. You come from something. And as we go through this, we're going to discover that our children suffer for our bad behavior, and they're blessed by our good behavior. There we go. All kinds of fun today. We're having a good time now. So our children are blessed by our good behavior, and they suffer for our bad behavior. So as you and I live our lives, we are impacting the people around us. It's not just our children. It's our coworkers. It's our wives, our friends. Everybody around us suffers for our bad behavior, and they're blessed by our good behavior. And so today, if we're going to have an altered legacy, I want us to understand a few things that can happen in our lives, ways that we can be impacted by Jesus, so that when we die, people would say that person loved Christ. So that when we die, it's not just the story repeated over again of what our family has done, the bad, the things that were wrong, the traits that were passed on to us by our families. But I believe that there is this radical moment where we can meet with Jesus and he redefines everything about our lives. Let's go ahead and look in our Bibles at the story of Peter in the book of John, chapter 1, verses 40 and 42. This is the story of Peter when he meets Jesus for the very first time. The word says, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the two who heard what John had said and who had followed Jesus. The first thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon and tell him, we have found the Messiah, that is the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. So what we see here is this guy John tells Andrew about Jesus. Andrew gets excited and he's like, wow, Jesus is awesome. And he goes and he finds his brother and he says, Simon, I got to tell you about this. This is the most amazing thing that's ever happened. We found the Messiah. We found Jesus. And so Jesus meets Simon and he says this. He looks at him and he says, you are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas, which when translated is Peter. So today, if we're to have an altered legacy, we will then have a Jesus identity. You and I, if we want to have an altered legacy, need to begin with a Jesus identity. When Jesus meets Peter, the first thing he does is tell Peter, or Simon, you're going to be called Peter. Jesus changes his name. Changes his name right outright. When we talk about Peter, we don't say Simon. We say Peter. Who's Simon? Simon Says? Like, I don't even know what you're talking about when you say Simon. But I do know what you're talking about when you say Peter. And so Jesus meets Simon, and his name is changed. Simon is given a brand new identity. Whatever he was before has now shifted because he has this encounter with Jesus, and he's given a new identity. Now, this is important because I think some names are notorious. So some names are associated with greatness. So if I said to you, Hitler, what kind of emotions do you get out of that name? What kind of feelings do you get out of the name Hitler? How many are ready to name their children Hitler? Nobody wants. What about Adolf? Anybody ready to name their kids Adolf? Why not? There's something associated with that name that we don't want our children to have. There's something associated with that name that you would say, no, I don't want anything to do with that for my kids. When my wife and I sat down to pick names for our children, we both did children's ministry. She was a teacher, and I was a children's pastor, so we knew literally hundreds and hundreds of kids. And so we'd be like, nope, I don't want that name. That name is associated with somebody I don't want my kid to be anything like. How many have ever done anything like that? Where you're like, no, I don't want. See, the name is powerful. A name is powerful. What comes with that name, the meaning of the name, is powerful, and it begins to define your life. How many of you, I remember when I was a little kid, I discovered that a name actually has meaning. And my parents gave me a little card, and it said William, and then sometimes they say determined guardian or shepherd. And I would look at that, and I would be like, wow, I'm William. I'm William. I'm determined guardian. And because of the name that was on this silly little card, I began to imagine myself as more. I began to imagine myself as someone that had talents and gifts and ability. I assigned meaning to that name. And so a name is powerful, and your identity is shifted by Jesus. When you have an encounter with Jesus, your identity changes. You're no longer to be marked by your name, but you're to be marked by the name that God has given you. You see, we can walk through our life and we would say, my family's identity has been shame. My family's identity has been alcoholism. And if I'm a Jackson, it means that I'm an angry person. If I'm a Thompson, it means that we steal. If I'm a Thomas, we go out and all we do is study all day. It's just, there's a legacy that comes with your name. And what I want you to know today is that if you have an encounter with Jesus, he will change your name. He will change your identity so that that legacy that comes with you is broken and you now have a new name. It is Prince of Peace, Son of God. You are now under a new authority. You have a new family with which to participate, and you should break every association, every tie that is in your mind that says, I am destined for destruction. I am destined to live this way because that's how my family lived. That's how everybody in my family operates. When you meet with Jesus, he gives you a new name, and that destiny that was born to you is broken. And you have a new identity. And from then on, your identity is altered by Jesus. And Jesus breaks the power of your old identity if you will allow him to do so today. The second element of an altered legacy is a Jesus mission. If you go back and look at Peter's calling in Matthew chapter 4, verses 18 through 20, it says, as Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, called Peter. There it is again, the changed identity. And his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. At once, they left their nets and followed him. And there is something about Jesus that as they came into the reality of who he is, as they began to understand who he was, it changed everything about them. They changed their actual mission in life. The Bible says they were fishermen, and Jesus turned them into fishers of men. For you and I, if we're going to have an altered legacy, if we're going to be remembered as followers of Jesus, it's because we shift our mission from providing for myself and living in my way, for me, for what I can get out of life, to having a Jesus mission. You can keep your profession, but you cannot keep your mission in life. You are now living for a new reason. You're now living so that others can know Jesus. You know, when you encounter Christ, what Jesus said to Peter and to Andrew is exactly what he says to us today. Whatever your job is, you are now a fisher of men. Everybody say, I'm a fisher of men. That's like, I'm a fisher of men. Oh, shoot. Okay. Winnie the Pooh. What's Eeyore? Eeyore's here. Oh. So we've got an altered legacy. It's when your mission is defined by Jesus. You walk out of this place today and you begin living your life for Jesus Christ. You begin living your life to be a fisher of men. You begin to share your life with others. You know, my dad retired from being a chaplain in the prison system a few years ago. And while he was in the retirement party, everybody got around together and we're like honoring him and sharing stories and talking about his life. It was like being alive for your funeral or retirement party. It's fantastic. and so he's sitting there, and everybody's talking about the impact he made. And what I realized during that retirement was that my dad didn't build a big house. He didn't build fancy cars. He didn't dedicate his life to having the best stuff. There are lots of men who spend their lives trying to get stuff. Every story that I heard in that retirement party was somebody who said, this is what Wayne did for me. This is how Wayne impacted my life. All four of my siblings, my brother, and my two sisters were there. And we said, Dad always chose us over work. He chose that profession because he wanted us to be built up. He wanted us to have a better life. And he understood it wasn't about money. He chose my mom. And my mom chose him so that we could have a better life. What my dad built was a family. What my dad built was a legacy of love. What my dad built was a Jesus legacy. You see, my dad didn't know Jesus growing up. My dad met Jesus, and Jesus radically changed his life. And instead of following a family tree or a history where every single person in my dad's family on his side had been divorced, every single person was an alcoholic on my dad's side, until he met Jesus and everything changed. My dad's legacy now we heard his legacy. Everybody got together and said, here is what you have done. Here's what you have accomplished. And his life stands for Jesus. Could our lives stand for Jesus? Could in one moment you be radically impacted and your mission is changed when you discover who Jesus is? The last element of an altered legacy is found in the book of Acts. It is the story of a Roman jailer. When Paul and Silas are thrown into prison, they spend the night after they were unjustly beaten, and they were thrown into jail, and they're in shackles, and they're singing praises to God. While that's happening, God sends an earthquake. The shackles break loose, and everyone can leave. Paul and Silas don't let anyone go, because if anyone escapes, the jailer is to be put to death. He has to take their place. And here's where we pick up. Acts chapter 16, verse 29. It says, the jailer called for lights, rushed in, and fell trembling before Paul and Silas. He then brought them out and asked, sirs, what must I do to be saved? They replied, believe in the Lord Jesus, and you will be saved, you and your household. Then they spoke the word of the Lord to him and all the others in his house. At that hour of the night, the jailer took them and washed their wounds. And then immediately he and all his household were baptized. The jailer brought them into his house and set a meal before them. He was filled with joy because he had come to believe in God, he and his whole household. If you want an altered legacy, you have a house that is a Jesus house. You raising children? You plan on raising children? If you have a family or you have an apartment and you have a roommate, you let your home be a Jesus home. You make a demonstration of faith in your house. You want your family to have an altered legacy? Alter their legacy. Bring them to Jesus. The jailer's entire household was baptized. The jailer said to his family, family, I want you all to meet Jesus. Bring your kids with you on Sunday. Growing up, I used to try to tell my mom and dad, hey, I feel sick this week. I don't think I can go to church. You know what they would say? That's awesome because God heals us. So let's go to where you can get healed. I'm like, that didn't work. I can't come up with an excuse to not go to church. You're like, I don't want to go. You're going to go. And you're going to be there. And I was like, and you know what happened? I grew up going to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. When I got out of my house and I'm living on my own, I tried to skip church. And I'm sitting at home. I'm like, I get to skip church finally. I don't have to go. And I'm sitting at home and I'm like, this is weird. I got dressed and went to church. Like, I don't know any other way to live. Because my mom and dad said, hey, when you're growing up, it's not optional. It was trained into me. And my mom and dad had a demonstration of faith in their house. When it came time to do the budget, they sat us down and said, hey, kids, look at the budget. We take 10% of all we have and we give it to Jesus first. That meant something to me as a kid because it meant that Jesus was real. If mom and dad were going to do it, if mom and dad were going to have a tangible demonstration of faith in our home, it meant that I could not ignore Jesus. I could not ignore as a son that their lives were impacted by Christ. I saw my mom and dad pray in the morning. We got together and we did devotions at night. Whatever was going on, we stopped. We shut the TV off. And before we went to bed, we read from the Bible. We prayed together. And let me tell you, we put mom and dad through hell to try to do devotions. Devotions, sometimes they would have to argue. It would be like a big ordeal to get everybody together, but they did it day in and day out. Day in and day out, there was something that was real in my house that said, we're going to follow Jesus. And let me tell you something, when your children grow up and they go out and they live, they're going to see, they're going to know that it was real. It was real. It wasn't just going to church and paying lip service to God. What a waste of time. What a waste of time. If you're not going to go home and have an altered home, where you have a Jesus home, where what happens when you encounter Christ makes a difference where you live, it's a waste of time. Because no one will remember what it was all about. They will say it was worthless because their life, they would have demonstrated it if it was real. And the people around us are watching us. They want to know that it's real. People want it to be real. Why is it such a turnoff when people say, oh, they're just hypocrites? They're just a bunch of people who don't really believe what they say. Because we want it to be real. We want it to reflect something in your life. So let your life be an altered home. Let there be a demonstration of Jesus in your house. Let there be a demonstration of Jesus in your life's mission. Let there be a demonstration of Jesus in your identity. And as I say that, it could be like, wow, look at all the things that I have to do now. Pastor Will wants me to change my identity, and he wants me to have a different life mission, and he wants me to do all of this stuff in my house, just to go through the motions and do all of these things. And let me tell you something. When you meet Jesus, when you get an encounter with Christ, when you come into the presence of Jesus, it's not something you have to do anymore. It's something that you get to do. It's not something where you say, wow, I have to do all of this and I have to do all of that. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to, but I get to. I want my children to know Jesus because he has been the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. Jesus has radically impacted my life. And if I get a chance to spend time with Jesus, every time I get to meet with Jesus Christ, my heart is filled. It's a real relationship, and I come out overflowing with love. Some of us, it's just a matter of I need to spend some more time in the presence of Christ, because then my legacy will be altered. Then my life will be changed, and I can't help but have a new identity. I can't help but have a new mission. I can't help but have a home that's a Jesus home, because all I want to do is be in the presence of this man, Jesus. This morning we have that opportunity. Let's all bow our heads and close our eyes. We have this opportunity today to be in the presence of Jesus, a life-altering, legacy-altering moment. Why do we gather here together in this place? Why do people serve? Why do people get together and do all that we do? Is because we have dedicated ourselves to this moment where we can meet with Jesus. So Jesus, we invite you today into this place. We invite you into our hearts and lives. God, we don't want to have our lives represent anything but you. We want our lives to be authentic representations that our children will know that it's real, because it's real. Because we have encountered you, because we have said no to this world so that we can say yes to you. Jesus, in everything that we do, we want you to be in our lives. Jesus, would you come and would you alter our legacy? Would we, because we are so passionately in love with you, discover a whole new way of living today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.